Good morning, Abraham.
It is.
I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. I have two questions.
As well.
I was working out in the gym recently, and I'm feeling absolutely marvelous. My workout's going really well. And while I'm taking a rest between sets, I pick up a brochure, and on the front of the brochure is a picture of a beautiful child who is apparently dying with leukemia. And I'm wondering, why is it that I do this to myself? I come out of a medical examination with a doctor, and the doctor tells me I'm in magnificent health of a person much younger than myself, and yet a little voice says to me, but one day you're going to come out of the doctor and he's going to tell you you have a terminal illness. Why am I doing this to myself? When I feel marvelous, I feel joy, but there's always a voice that says to me, one day you won't feel that way.
Well, we talked about that very briefly earlier when we said humans commonly use criteria other than the way they feel as their reason to act. And so you've got to understand that physicians are not in the business of treating people who are thriving. They're in the business of dealing with people who are in states of less than thriving. So 100% or nearly so of their data collection is focused upon something you don't want. And it affects their view on human life. And the more you listen to them, the more they will talk to you about your fallibility rather than about your invincibility. They're not talking to you about the law of attraction. They're not talking to you about the flow. Their business is dealing with people who have figured out how to resist the flow. And it's logical that when they look at you, when you go in, you're not saying, give me an examination and give me a long list of what's right. You go in asking them to see if they can find anything wrong with you. And when they get pointed toward that for a period of time, then large segments of your culture begin to do that. Now, there's another big reason for that too. And this is really the best answer to the question for you specifically. To everyone, really. In this contrast that we've talked about that you are evaluating, you came forth in order to sift through it, in order to come to greater clarity about what you want. And it is a given that to know what you do want, you have to know what you don't want. In other words, you got to ask the question before you can get the answer. You have to acknowledge the problem before you can find the solution. You have to acknowledge that it could be better before you can ask for it to be better. In other words, it's just those two sides of everything. Humans get stuck on the problem side. And that's really what we're talking about. When we said to you that your source energy, in the moment that you have a problem and you ask for a solution, source becomes the solution. Source does not spend a moment beating the drum in trying to justify the reason for the solution. Source knows that you're worthy of the solution and goes immediately to it, you see. Mm-hmm. And when humans don't, then they get stuck in that vibration. And that, we know it's a very simplistic statement, but that is the reason for all of that. Then you might ask, but why a baby? What could a baby possibly do in terms of conversation or thought that could pinch off their flow of well-being? And we say, was the baby hatched on a bush? Is it a berry on a tree? Or was it born in the belly of a woman who had emotion? Was it born in the belly of a woman who was surrounded by other vibrations? In other words, in the moment that the first cell of you joins the other, as you begin to be that forming body, you are a vibrational being that is affected by the vibrations that surround you. Every consciousness that comes forth into every fetus knows full well what they are coming forth into. And you have such a feeling from your non-physical vantage point of invincibility, of understanding that the current is really one of well-being and an expectation of getting to go with that, that you're really not very much nitpicking about where you're born or to who you're born or to what kind of body you're born into. In other words, you more or less say, let me at it, I'll figure it out when I get there because I know the entire universe is rooting for me. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes you get off to rough and rocky starts. Sometimes we listen to the tales of Jerry talking about the beatings and the horrible childhood that he had. If his parents were raising him in the environment today, protective services would have taken him and his siblings away from their parents in the first week of their birth. In other words, they would not have been allowed to be fostered in such a hostile environment. And while he suffered as a youth and his health was terrible because of the resistance that he was enduring as his surroundings caused a bucking of that current, it wasn't very long before he shook loose of that, really a teenager, and started seeing life through his own eyes. And little by little by little, the questions that he kept asking kept bringing him to more and more solutions, until today you will not meet a healthier physical body, a healthier mind, or someone going more with the flow of well-being, you see. And so life is really about that vibrational relationship. And when you start to look at everything through that lens, then everything begins to make sense to you. We visited with a woman at length for a while Jerry and Esther were doing telephone consultations. They were traveling less. And a woman called regularly, and just as you described, she'd get a clean bill of health, but she wouldn't even make it out of the doctor's office before she started worrying again, because they had done such a good job of indoctrinating the belief in her that said, you've got to catch it while it's small. So even though we can't see it yet, it might really be there, and next week it might be big enough to see it. And we want to say to you, your cellular body is consciousness that's dealing with all of that. You have the potential for every disease, and some that haven't even been named yet, in your body. And the cells of your body are righting themselves on a moment-to-moment basis. And when you feel wonderful, you're hindering that not at all. And so you don't even know that you cured yourself today of 17 deadly diseases. 17 or 18 or 19 or 20 deadly diseases that have not yet been given labels, you cured yourself of today. But when the doctor convinces you that you have no control over your body, that there are outside forces that are asserting themselves into your experience, then you stand guarded. And now the answer to your question is this. When you understand that you can tell by the way you feel whether you're allowing thriving or not, then you are less willing to listen to the peanut gallery that is, for one reason or another, wanting you to focus upon your body in a different way. Doctors are well-meaning, and we adore them. And we think that the evolution of medicine in your environment is staggering. And if doctors could understand the vibrational nature of your being and stop bucking that current, wellness would begin to abound. If doctors, scientists, people could begin looking for the cause instead of the cure, they would discover that the cause is vibrational and always accompanied by emotion, and that the way you feel is pointing right at that thing you're doing that's setting something in motion. So instead of going to the doctor for an examination, we want you in the middle of your anger to say, oh yeah, that's that thing I do that prohibits my abundant wealth. How can I work my mind around so that I don't feel that way? How can I stop blocking the wellness? Blocking the wellness. If you weren't doing that thing you do that keeps the wellness from flowing, you'd be well. It's just that simple. And you're not going to find out, in most cases, that thing you're doing that's blocking the wellness by going to the doctor. He's going to exaggerate that thing you do and cause you to block it more. And the reason that we know that is because we can see the vibrational balance in the physical body. And at the time of diagnosis, there is always a huge spike in resistance and a lowering of the allowing of the well-being. Now, once he scares you into that panic, if he can convince you that he's got a pill that will solve it, then maybe you'll come down from that resistance and maybe you'll find a solution, and that's all well and good. We just don't see the point of digging yourself into a 20-foot hole only to dig yourself out, and then when you're on even ground, feel triumphant.
Yes. yes.
So your question was, why do I do that to myself? Why, even though I'm healthy, why do I worry about not being healthy? And we say, think about it. You want to be healthy. Let's say you've been sick, which makes you want to be well. Or let's say you've been well and you like being well. So you want to be well, you want to be well, you want to be well. And Source says, yes, yes, yes. And then Source says, I hold you completely and utterly, unequivocally in the vibration of wellness. That's the vibration I see of you. That is the dominant vibration. And then you read a statistic, or you think of something that you've learned, and you think in the midst of that powerful wanting to be well, in the power of that current of wanting to be well, you think, but what if I get sick? Well, what kind of thought is that in comparison with this knowing? That's a thought that's pushing in opposite direction. Now, we want to put this into a new way. Let's say that that thought's not pushing in opposite direction. Let's just say that thought's what it is, but that thought's not going with the current. Those boulders in the stream that Jerry and Esther floated down weren't going upstream. They were just sitting there. But you should have seen the spout of water and the indication of resistance that they were causing because the boulders were not going with the flow. And that's what happens to all of you. When you really, 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 really want something, but you're beating the drum of something that's keeping you from going with the flow, you feel that discord of not going with the flow. And that's what you're describing. It's your inner being's disagreement with that terrible thought that you were thinking. If your inner being agreed with you that you're probably going to get sick, then you'd be in vibrational alignment with your inner being and you wouldn't feel negative emotion. You'd just be sick.
Yes.
But it doesn't work that way because your inner being knows too much. Jesus, who understood this healing, who went away and found alignment with Source, came to the place that he knew that if he could hold you in the vision of the wellness that he knew was really you, that he could dominate the vibration of your being and maybe influence you to that knowing. And then he said, go forth and tell no one, because he knew if you talked about it, they'd talk you right back in to the resistance that was disallowing your well-being to begin with. When the woman touched his robe, he said, it is your belief, it is your faith that makes you whole. In other words, it's not the power that I have that I'm asserting into you. It's that something about your relationship with me causes you to temporarily suspend your resistance and let you go with the wellness that you deserve and are worthy of always, you see. Esther used to watch television and she'd see those commercials, the medical commercials. She almost can't watch television without seeing them. And it was before she was fast on the mute button, and so she'd be well into it before, and she would throw her remote control at the sofa as she would shout, don't you know what you are doing to those people? And we said to Esther, they must be doing it to you too, or you would not feel this way. In other words, that negative emotion that you are feeling means that you are watching something that's causing you to buck the current. Maybe there's something within your vibration that they are merely activating. And that's what you're describing. She didn't then totally believe in her wellness. And so when they aggravated that, it amplified her sensation of the stream that she wasn't going with. You see, and so she could say in very accurate terms, as I watch this commercial, it activates my desire for wellness. It causes my stream about wellness to go faster. But the words of this commercial are causing me to plant myself in this stream and not let myself go. Therefore, I don't like the way this commercial feels. Therefore, you should stop offering that commercial to me. And over time, we were able to help Esther to understand that just because they say it doesn't make it so for her. Just because they believe it, just because they have even facts and evidence, doesn't make it so for her. The statistics that people gather are only about other people's relationship with the stream. It doesn't have anything to do with your relationship to the stream, but the madder they make you, the more it affects your relationship with the stream, you see. Yes. So now Esther understands that, and when she sees the commercials, she looks at what they're wearing. She wonders how good their life is. She hopes they're having a thriving practice. she hopes that they're helping someone, but she doesn't have the feeling of aggravation about it, because to her, those people are a non-issue. Just like the majority of what's going on this planet is a non-issue to Jerry and Esther.